So Dillian Whyte comes back on December 15th against Ebeneezer Tetteh. Now, some of you may remember that Ebeneezer Tetteh fought Daniel Dubois a couple years ago, and he did not look impressive, to say the least. He got knocked out in one round. He is supposedly 36 years of age. I suspect he's a lot older than that. And he is not somebody that should give Dillian Whyte any real trouble, as washed up as Dillian Whyte is. Now, the interesting thing here is the fight is taking place in Gibraltar. Now, this is not the first time that Dillian Whyte has fought in Gibraltar. The first time was against Alexander Povetkin in the rematch. Now, the reason it's taking place in Gibraltar is interesting this time. Last time it was because there was lockdown on, but this time, of course, there's no lockdown. There is an issue with Dillian Whyte failing a PED test ahead of the Anthony Joshua rematch, which never was, and he hasn't resolved that issue, as far as I can tell. That is why his last fight was in Ireland, and that was under the Irish commission, and this one will be in Gibraltar. Under which commission, I'm not yet sure, because if you go back to the Whyte Povetkin card, normally on BoxRec it will tell you on the top left who is commissioning the fight, who's sanctioning the fight, whether it's the British Boxing Board of Control, the New York State Athletic Commission, the Irish, whatever the case may be, it will tell you there in the top left. But for this particular show, back in March of 2021, it doesn't say who the commission were. Now, the fight is on YouTube, and I went to go check on the actual fight film itself. And David Diamante announced that it was sanctioned under the auspices of the British Boxing Board of Control. Now, that could be taken to mean that the British Boxing Board of Control helped sanction the fight, or they supervised the fight, but they weren't necessarily the official sanctioners of the fight, if that makes sense. Because again, they do not appear on the BoxRec page for the show, which is unusual. And if you look at the Whyte Tetteh card here, nobody appears as sanctioning the bout either here. There's no commission listed in the top left-hand side of the graphic you can see on screen. So I'm not sure who exactly Dillian Whyte is going to get to commission this bout, to sanction this bout. Whether it will be the British Boxing Board of Control, I can't imagine it would be, or else surely he'd be fighting in Britain. Remember, he fought in Ireland last time out against Christian Hammer, this time out against Ebeneezer Tetteh in Gibraltar. Now, what I can tell you though, is that the fight will be promoted, you might be able to see that here, by a guy called Michael Offo. Now, Michael Offo is some type of business associate of Dillian Whyte. How do I know this? Well, first of all, he's promoting this show, but also because he manages Fabio Wardley. He's the official manager. Now, Fabio Wardley, as far as I was aware, was managed by Dillian Whyte's managerial company. Okay, so maybe this Michael Offo guy is the person in charge of the day-to-day running of Dillian Whyte's management company. I'm not sure. Okay, but he is acting as official promoter for this Dillian Whyte fight against Ebeneezer Tetteh in Gibraltar. What is going on with the PED issue? Presumably it hasn't been resolved. Will it ever be resolved? Is Dillian Whyte not interested in working with the British Boxing Board of Control because he feels like he's going to receive a ban? And that's a lot of bad publicity at this stage of his career. I don't know. But what I can say is Dillian Whyte has failed 2 PED tests in the past, or had adverse findings on one of those occasions. The first occasion, of course, he served a 2-year ban, so there's nothing to be resolved about that. The second occasion was in the run-up to the Oscar Rivas fight. And in that instance, there was actually a hearing with the British board in UCAD, and they were satisfied that Dillian Whyte had done no wrong. So they allowed the Oscar Rivas fight to go ahead. Now, whether you've got an issue with the British board in UCAD coming to that decision, you have to take it up with them. But they were apparently satisfied that Dillian Whyte hadn't done any wrong, and his fight with Oscar Rivas proceeded as normal. But in this particular instance, again, it hasn't been resolved. But Dillian Whyte has become a bit of an expert at managing, and he would by this point, right? Because it's his 3rd failed test, at managing a failed test from a PR perspective, because he just keeps his head down. He doesn't make a fuss, and he waits for the storm to blow over. He knows that before long, boxing fans are going to move on to something else. They're going to forget about Dillian Whyte's PED issue, and they'll be concentrating on some other scandal or some other fight or some other fighter, and all will be forgotten. Or they might even get distracted by a different guy who's failed a PED test more recently. So yeah, Dillian Whyte has learned how to play these things in terms of PR. And it's the same here, because on all the shows he's been on, Talk Sport, all the interviews he's done, nobody asks him about PEDs. I don't know whether before the shows begin, he tells them that they're not allowed to ask him about it or what, but nobody asks. And so he doesn't feel the need to say anything. PR job is fantastic by Dillian Whyte. And he might not even have a PR team. He just might be, wise and wily enough himself to know how to deal with these things. So yeah, Whyte versus Tetteh, Gibraltar. On the undercard, you've got Thomas Carty, who again is a fighter I think is managed by Dillian Whyte. He certainly was earlier on in his career. He's an Irish fighter. And randomly, you've got Mike Perez. Yes, Mike Perez, the guy who fought Myris Breedis at cruiserweight, the guy who got knocked out in one round by Povetkin, the guy who, way back in the days, won Prize Fighter. You guys remember that? When Eddie Hearn had Mike Perez over for Prize Fighter? So yeah, Mike Perez, incredibly, is ranked in the top 10 by one of the heavyweight sanctioning bodies. In fact, let me check which sanctioning body it is, because I do have the heavyweight rankings here. So let's have a look here. Yeah, Mike Perez is ranked, you can see, number 8 by the WBA. How on earth this guy is ranked so high in the top 10 by any sanctioning body? Heavyweight is beyond my understanding. Anyway, Whyte Tetteh, it should be a little run out for Dillian Whyte, but it may be a measure of how past it he is. Remember, he did fight earlier on this year, Dillian Whyte. So it's not like he's been out the ring 2 years, although, the fight he had for his comeback against Christian Hammer didn't last very long. That was back in March. It was only a 3-rounder. But still, he's been out, he's had a fight, he comes back against Tetteh. If he has any trouble whatsoever, and if he can't get Tetteh out of there relatively early, it will be a measure, I think, of how far Dillian Whyte has fallen and how washed up he now is. And God forbid he actually lost to Ebeneezer Tetteh or even got hurt by him. That would be a shocker, truth be told. So yeah, there you go. Dillian Whyte coming back against Ebeneezer Tetteh. Whenever I hear the word Ebeneezer, it reminds me of that terrible song from the 1990s, the early 90s. He's a good, he's Ebeneezer. You know the song I'm talking about? Are you surrounded by mindless bots in human form who adhere to the norm and blindly conform? Who swallow all the mainstream BS and actually ridicule you for questioning things? Do you wish you had more free-thinking individuals in your life to network and converse with? Well, look no further. We're right here. Come and join the Brotherhood of Reason on Patreon. You'll gain access to my weekly topical content where we take deep dives on an endless variety of subjects, as well as my vast back catalogue of podcasts, videos, interviews, movie decodings, and my Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You'll also get to talk and network with myself and hundreds of other people in our members chat. You can enjoy all this via the Patreon app or on desktop and download all my podcasts in high-quality MP3. There's no contract, no commitment. You can cancel at any time, just like Netflix, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper. Just download the app from the Play Store or the App Store, or simply visit patreon.com on a web browser. Then head on over to my page and select the tier called the Brotherhood of Reason. All the links are in the description box below. And just a quick money-saving tip for Apple users. If you purchase your Patreon subscription on the desktop site or on Android, then you'll avoid the ridiculous 30% fee that Apple charges for purchases made on the iOS app. So if you're on iPhone or iPad, save yourself some money by buying your subscription on the actual Patreon website or on Android, because it's a lot cheaper. Once you've made that initial purchase, you can then use the Patreon app on your iPhone or iPad thereafter to access and enjoy your content as normal.